Alright, this is my very first attempt to do any kind of guitar body work. I watched a couple videos that said to use a firm wire brush and push really hard. Instead, I got this firm wire, steel wire drill attachment and went at it here. And as you might be able to see, there's definitely, you can definitely see some scratches from it. So we will see after the first coat whether or not that's going to be too detrimental. But you could definitely see, it's really hard to see on video, but you can see where the pores are opening up. So whether you do the wire brushing by hand or whether you use a drill bit like I did, you can definitely see the pores opening up, and so it's pretty easy to see where you need to do a little bit more work on. Of course, the cutaways here on this ash strap body were the hardest part to do, and I ended up having to take the drill bit off and just brushing it back and forth by hand a little bit. So I'm about ready to get painting. I have decided on a satin black. I didn't want glass, I didn't want gloss, I didn't want matte, so I decided to go something in between, and we're going to lay down a layer of black before we do the cerusing. Alright, I got the first coat on. I'm pretty happy with it so far, especially considering what an absolute amateur I am at painting. There's only one part where I put it on too close or too thick, and it ran a little bit. It's right there. You can see there's a little bit of drip marking right there. So we'll see how that turns out when we do another coat and when we do the cerusing. You can also see right here some scratches that kind of go diagonal of the grain that doesn't look too great. It's surprising that there's only a few parts that actually do that. There's some more on here. As the paint dries, you can see a little bit more of it, which I'm hoping means that as I put another coat on, that you'll see that less. Okay, I got about 3 to 4 coats on this thing now. I brought it in the garage because my sprinklers are going to go on overnight. Overall, it's pretty even, although there are some spots that are a little shinier than others, but I'm afraid that if I keep trying to even it out, then there's always going to be a spot that's a little uneven. So I'm going to leave it be and see how it looks in the morning. I did have to do some touch-up work on the bottom. So I've seen a lot of people kind of turn these things horizontally to paint, and I think that's a better idea, because it's hard to get paint to go on the bottom when you're hanging it like this. I'm sure there's methods out there, but it's a little more challenging. But so far, you know, considering my skill level, I'm still pretty happy with it. Actually get to the body proper, I'm going to do some test with the body cavity. That way, if I need to redo it, or if I'm not happy with the color or the results, that I can try again. I got this sample size paint. Other videos said you need to use either super thick putty or all the way down to thin paint, and I don't know what's I don't know what's necessary and what's just personal preference. I'm going to try this paint straight out of the can first, and then if I don't like that, then I'm going to try to thin it, and if I don't like that, then we'll see what other materials. Okay, got my paint ready. Got my foam paintbrush, and to pull it off, I got the steel wool. Again, I saw different techniques of how to actually apply the paint. I'm going with just a foam brush because it seems like it would be really easy, and the brushing on itself didn't seem to matter that much. So just going to go ahead and apply it liberally. And then I guess with this test, getting into the cavity with the wool is going to be the hard part. So I'm going to try to fold this thing to a size that it will fit in here.
I've already messed up.
That's alright. I'm going to tear it to make it smaller.
So what's steel wool good for?
It's used for many different things. In this case, it's just for removing paint. And this, the instructions I saw said to press very lightly. I'm finding that I gotta press a little bit harder than I expected. Obviously the corner is a problem with this test surface, but not going to be a problem with the outer body. So instead of focusing on getting the cracks right, I'm going to focus on just getting the middle section, since that's the only part that's going to be really applicable to the main job. Go ahead and pause. So again, just focusing on the middle right here, I'm pretty happy with the pattern, so I'm going to go ahead and work on the body. Again, getting these cracks, these crannies right here, and these nooks and crannies, there's not going to be something I'm going to have to worry about when I'm doing the exterior body right here, because there's no hard edge corners like that I'm going to have to try to work on. So I'm not worried that that's caked up on the edges there. I'm going to go ahead and try to do it on the main body now. Oh, and one other note, I was worried about unevenness in the black paint when I was spray painting yesterday, and it turned out that that's not something I had to be concerned about, because once it dried, there's virtually no spots that are shinier than anything else. So if you're a first time painter like me, that's not something you should be concerned with if you see spots that are shinier than others. And I did not thin this paint, and I thought the results were okay. So I'm going to continue with unthinned version. I'm just going to slather it on, and again, it's not trying to be any kind of precise in here. I just want a nice, going to push a little harder to try to get into those grains. And I'm not sure if it's showing up on camera, but you might be able to see that it's already sticking into the grains and not the rest of it.
You can kind of see.
But go ahead and pull it off with the steel wool now. So it's not pulling off as easily as I would have hoped. It's probably because of the thickness. So for the next half of it, I'm going to go ahead and thin the paint, and hopefully that will keep it from sticking to the parts of the body that don't have the dark grain in it. Go ahead and pause. Okay, so I'm not happy with this result, because this is holding on to way more of the pink than I intended. Probably because of how long I left the paint on here, because I tried in this pocket right here, and this is exactly what I wanted here, and to just pick it into the grains instead of this. So what I did here different is just applied a small amount and one section at a time, and then very quickly went over it with the steel wool. I wish I would have shown that instead. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paint over this with more black, because I'm really not happy with this. So we're going to start over on this side and hopefully get it looking more like this. Okay, time for an update now that I have spent a couple hours cerusing. I did what I said. I completely repainted this half with black, let it set for a couple hours, and then returned to it, and I'm much more happy with the results the second time around. Part of that is because I used paint thinner. I did 4 to 5 to 1 ratio, and it worked out a lot better. So one thing I did find is, despite the fact that I did 3 or 4 passes, obviously it wasn't very even, and so what I did just now is I went over it with black again, because with just a little bit of steel wool, 000 steel wool, the brown wood was showing underneath here and here and on bottom. So those are obviously parts where they did not get the full coat of paint before. So I hit it with the spray can again and am just letting it dry for a while longer. The spot on back is another spot I had to repaint before I go again. So I experimented with a couple of different ways of pulling off the paint. I tried a terry cloth, which worked okay, but I ended up going back to the steel wool. Now this is something that you're going to have to find what works best for you, because how hard you push with the steel wool depends on how long the paint has been sitting there and how thick the paint was. I was told to press very gently with the steel wool, but if I pressed really gently, I ended up getting a lot of the black part just smudged with the pink paint, and obviously that's not what you want. You just want it filling the grain. So I decided to just go with what was necessary, push as hard as I needed to, and in some of those cases it was fairly hard. Obviously not as hard as going it over with the steel brush, which I used to open up the pores in the first place, but it still had to push a lot harder than I expected. So that's something that you'll want to start light and then push harder as necessary to get the finish looking the way you want it to. Quick update, it's been a week since I started this project, and in that time I spent a little bit of time every day doing little touch-ups here and there. Just areas where I noticed that there's wood grain that didn't get any pink paint in there, and other areas that some of the black paint got too sanded off, and so I resprayed with black paint and then did another round of cerusing. And there's just some areas that needed extra work, again, especially in the cutaways here. It needed extra attention, and also I think I mentioned before, the paint was really thin on the bottom layer, so I needed to redo that a little bit as well. Overall, I'm pleased with it. It's definitely not perfect. There's some areas where the scratches, this is probably the most obvious one right here, where the scratches picked up the paint as well. But little by little, I touched it up to get it as good as it can get, considering the amateur work that I did. And so what I did just now is coated it in polyurethane. I know there's other products that are specifically for guitar finishes, but I didn't want to spend an arm and a leg on something like that. Kind of wanted to keep with the spirit of being a homegrown product. So I just sprayed a couple coats of clear satin polyurethane Minwax right here, and it's interesting because you can't tell very much that it's on there. It's a very, very light difference. It's a little bit shinier, but it doesn't look thick at all. It doesn't look like there's a coat on it. It just looks like, for better for worse, it looks like the paint and the cerusing. And right now I kind of like that idea, because I'm digging the kind of raw look to it. So I think I'm going to keep it. I'm still kind of playing with the idea of doing a heavier gloss coat, or doing maybe even a wax polish to fill in the grooves, but for now I kind of like it, especially because I think it goes with the imperfections. Because there are so many areas where it's just not professional, I don't know if putting a real thick coat of gloss on there would really do service to the kind of rough job that it ended up looking like. It almost looks road worn in a way to me, so I'm kind of just going with that and going from there.